The transport shuttle's engines screamed as it tore through Kepler 442c's blood-red atmosphere. Cadet Marcus Chen pressed his face against the reinforced viewport, watching massive storm clouds swirl below like angry gods. Lightning the size of city blocks carved jagged paths through the crimson sky, and Marcus could feel the shuttle shake with each thunderclap. "First time on a Class X Deathworld, human?" chittered Instructor Vextai, her 4 arms working the controls with practiced ease. The Zephyrian's compound eyes reflected the crimson glow from outside, making her look even more insectoid than usual. Marcus nodded, his throat dry despite the recycled air. "Yes, ma'am, though I studied the briefings extensively." Vextai's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Briefings cannot prepare you for Kithara, little mammal. This world has claimed more military cadets than any other training facility in the Galactic Alliance. Even our best warriors from the warrior caste Draknari rarely survive their first week without serious injury." Through the viewport, Marcus caught his first glimpse of the surface. Massive trees stretched toward the sky like twisted spears, their trunks easily 50 meters wide. Between them, he could see movement, shadows the size of buildings gliding between the canopy. His enhanced human vision picked up details that would be invisible to most species: scales that glittered like metal, eyes that burned like yellow stars, teeth longer than his entire body. "The Titan worms," Vextai noted, following his gaze. "Apex predators, 300 meters long, intelligent enough to use tools, and aggressive enough to attack anything that moves. The colonists who first tried to settle here called them dragons before they all died screaming." The shuttle landed with a bone-jarring thud on a metal platform surrounded by an energy barrier. Through the shimmering field, Marcus could see the training camp, a collection of reinforced buildings that looked more like a military fortress than a school. Automated defense turrets tracked the sky constantly, and he counted at least 6 different early warning systems scanning the jungle beyond. "Listen carefully, Cadet Chen," Vextai said as the shuttle powered down. "You will be sharing this facility with cadets from 17 different species, Draknari warriors who can bench press a hover tank, crystalline Vorthak whose bodies are harder than diamond, bioengineered Helix soldiers who can regenerate lost limbs. All of them are naturally stronger, faster, or more durable than baseline humans." Marcus shouldered his pack, checking that his sidearm was secure. "Understood, ma'am." "I doubt you do." Vextai's voice carried a note Marcus couldn't interpret. "But you will learn. The question is whether you will survive long enough to graduate." The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped onto Kithara for the first time. The gravity was heavier than Earth standard, making his pack feel like it weighed twice as much. The air was thick and humid, carrying scents of rotting vegetation and something else. Something predatory and wild that made every nerve in his body scream danger. A massive Draknari approached, his scaled hide bearing the scars of countless battles. The alien stood nearly 3 meters tall, with arms like tree trunks and claws that could shred steel. Behind him, a cluster of other cadets watched nervously, a crystalline Vorthak whose body caught the red sunlight like a prism, 2 insectoid Zephyrians similar to Vextai, and something that looked like a living shadow wrapped in advanced armor. "So," rumbled the Draknari in accented galactic standard, "this is the human. I am war leader in training Thakmor of the Obsidian clan. I have killed prey beasts twice my size with my bare claws." He leaned down, bringing his scarred snout close to Marcus's face. "Tell me, Pink Skin, what makes you think you belong here?" Marcus met the alien's burning yellow eyes without flinching. "I earned my place the same way everyone else did, sir. Through the qualifying trials." Thakmor's laugh was like rocks grinding together. "The qualifying trials. Yes, I heard about those. You humans have such interesting ways of proving yourselves. endurance tests instead of combat trials, persistence hunting instead of honorable single combat. He straightened to his full height. We shall see how your mammalian determination serves you when you face a real predator. The tour of the facility was brief and brutal. The armory contained weapons designed for beings far stronger than humans. Marcus could barely lift some of the rifles that other species wielded one-handed. The medical bay was stocked with healing technology designed for beings who could survive having limbs torn off. The cemetery behind the main building contained far too many fresh graves. "Your living quarters," announced Sergeant Clix, a Helix soldier whose left arm bore clear signs of recent regeneration. "Lights out at 2200 hours. First training exercise begins at 0500. Do not leave the compound after dark under any circumstances." Marcus's room was Spartan: a bed, a desk, a small storage locker, and a window that looked out into the jungle. As the red sun began to set, he could see shapes moving between the trees. Large shapes. Hunting shapes. He was unpacking his gear when the first scream echoed across the compound. Marcus rushed to his window and saw chaos erupting in the jungle beyond the barrier. Something massive was moving through the trees, branches snapping like twigs under its weight. The automated defense systems came online, searchlights cutting through the growing darkness as warning klaxons wailed. "All cadets to emergency positions," Sergeant Clix's voice boomed over the intercom. "Titan worm pack approaching from the northeast. This is not a drill." Marcus grabbed his rifle and rushed toward the armory where other cadets were already suiting up in powered armor. Thakmor was there, checking his massive plasma cannon with professional efficiency. The Draknari glanced at Marcus and snorted. "Stay back, human. This is work for real warriors." Through the reinforced windows of the armory, Marcus could see them now. 3 Titan worms, each one the size of an ancient earth dragon from mythology, were approaching the compound. Their scales gleamed like black metal in the searchlights, and their eyes burned with predatory intelligence. The lead beast was massive even by Titan worm standards, with scars across its snout that spoke of countless battles. The automated turrets opened fire, filling the night with streams of plasma and kinetic rounds. The Titan worms roared in response, a sound that made the building shake and sent ice through Marcus's veins. But something strange happened as the cadets rushed out to support the defenses. The lead Titan worm's massive head turned toward them, scanning the group with eyes like molten gold. Its gaze passed over Thakmor, over the Vorthak, over the other cadets, and stopped on Marcus. The great beast went completely still. For a moment that seemed to last forever, predator and human stared at each other across the barrier. Marcus felt something primal stir in his chest, not fear, but something deeper. Something that had kept his ancestors alive when they faced down cave bears with nothing but sharpened sticks. Something that had driven them to hunt mammoths across frozen wastelands and cross oceans in wooden boats. The Titan worm's eyes widened. Its head drew back, and for the first time since the attack began, it made a sound that wasn't a roar. It was almost questioning, uncertain. Then, to everyone's amazement, the great beast turned away. "What's it doing?" whispered one of the Zephyrian cadets. The lead Titan worm was retreating, calling to its pack with low, rumbling vocalizations. Within moments, all 3 of the massive predators had melted back into the jungle, leaving only broken trees and confused silence behind. Sergeant Clix lowered his weapon slowly. "In 15 years on this posting," he said, his voice barely audible, "I have never seen a Titan worm retreat from prey. Never." Thakmor was staring at Marcus with something that might have been respect or might have been suspicion. "You!" he growled. "What did you do?" Marcus holstered his unused rifle, still feeling the echo of that strange moment when he'd met the Titan worm's gaze. "I didn't do anything. I just looked at it." "Titan worms do not retreat," the Draknari insisted. They are apex predators. They know no fear. Maybe, Marcus said quietly, remembering stories his grandmother had told him about his ancestors. They recognize something in humans that other species don't. That night, as Marcus lay in his narrow bunk listening to the sounds of the Kitharan jungle, he thought about persistence, about endurance, about the unique trait that had allowed humans to hunt down prey that was faster, stronger, and better armed than they were. Not through superior strength or speed, but through sheer relentless determination. Perhaps, he thought as sleep finally took him, the Titan worms knew something about humans that even humans themselves had forgotten. Something that made even apex predators think twice before challenging them. Outside his window, the jungle was full of sounds, roars, screams, and hunting calls from dozens of deadly species. But none of them came close to the compound that night. And in the morning, Marcus would learn that the perimeter sensors had detected something unprecedented, tracks from nearly every major predator species on Cathara, all leading toward the compound, and then veering away. As if something about the human presence had made them all decide they had better places to be. The other cadets were beginning to look at Marcus differently, not with the dismissive tolerance they'd shown before, but with something approaching wariness. Thakmor, in particular, seemed troubled by what he'd witnessed. "Tomorrow," the Draknari announced at morning formation, "we begin jungle survival training. Small groups will be dropped at various points in the wilderness and expected to navigate back to base camp. Survival rate is typically 60% for experienced cadets." He looked directly at Marcus. "For humans, the survival rate has historically been much lower." Marcus nodded, checking his gear one final time. He didn't know what the next day would bring. But he was beginning to suspect that his survival might depend on something far older and more fundamental than military training. Something that had been stalking through human DNA since the days when his ancestors looked up at the stars and decided they wanted to go there, no matter what stood in their way. Something that apex predators, for all their power and ferocity, instinctively recognized and feared. The dropship's engines made barely a whisper as it descended through the canopy, its advanced stealth technology allowing it to slip between the massive trees without alerting the predators below. Marcus felt his stomach lurch as the craft banked sharply to avoid a hunting pack of aerial predators, something Sergeant Clicks had called razor-wing stalkers. "Drop zone approaching," announced the pilot, a modified AI that spoke in clipped professional tones. "Teams will be deployed at 1-kilometer intervals. Remember, you have 72 hours to reach the extraction point. Use of emergency beacons results in automatic failure." Marcus checked his equipment one final time. Standard survival kit, basic rations for 3 days, a sidearm with limited ammunition, and a knife that seemed laughably small compared to the threats waiting below. His assigned partner for the exercise was Zixara, one of the Zephyrian cadets whose compound eyes and natural agility made her ideally suited for jungle navigation. "First drop," the pilot announced. "Team 7, Draknari war leader in training Thakmor, and Helix regenerative cast Veltar." Marcus watched through the viewport as the two massive aliens dropped into a small clearing, their heavy forms disappearing immediately into the undergrowth. Within seconds, he could hear the distinctive roar of a Draknari war cry echoing through the jungle, followed by the sound of something large and angry crashing through the vegetation. "Typical," muttered Zixara, her mandibles clicking nervously. "Thakmor will fight everything he encounters rather than avoid it. It is the Draknari way." "Second drop," the pilot continued. "Team 4, Vorthak, Crystalcast, Nalseth, and Shadow Dancer Wraith Unit Epsilon." The crystalline alien and the living shadow dropped silently into a different clearing. Almost immediately, Marcus saw the local plant life begin to react to Nalseth's presence, the Vorthak's natural bioelectric field causing nearby vegetation to spark and writhe. "Team 2, the pilot announced. Human Cadet Marcus Chen and Zephyrian Scoutcast Zixara. Marcus and Zixara stepped to the drop platform. Below them, the jungle canopy stretched endlessly in all directions, a green ocean broken only by the occasional massive tree that rose above the rest. Somewhere in that wilderness was their extraction point, an abandoned research station 40 kilometers north. "Ready, human?" Zixara asked, her 4 arms checking her equipment with practiced efficiency. "Ready," Marcus replied, though his heart was pounding hard enough to be audible. They dropped through the canopy on individual grav chutes, landing in a small clearing surrounded by trees that looked like twisted cathedrals. The moment Marcus touched down, he felt the jungle come alive around him. Not just the obvious sounds, the calls of unseen creatures, the rustle of movement in the underbrush, but something deeper. A sense of countless eyes watching, evaluating, deciding. "This way," Zixara said, consulting her navigation device. "North-northeast, through the grove of singing stones. According to the tactical maps, it is the shortest route to—" She stopped mid-sentence, her compound eyes reflecting the filtered sunlight as she stared past Marcus into the jungle. Her mandibles were spread wide in what Marcus recognized as an expression of pure terror. "What is it?" Marcus asked, slowly turning to follow her gaze. Standing less than 20 meters away was something that shouldn't exist. The creature was roughly humanoid in shape, but stood nearly 4 meters tall, its body covered in chitinous plates that gleamed like black ceramic. Its head was elongated and predatory, with too many eyes and a mouth full of needle-sharp teeth. Most terrifying of all, its movements were completely silent. This thing could have snuck up on them without making a sound. "Phantom Reaper," Zixara whispered. "Apex stealth predator. They hunt in perfect silence and can kill a Draknari warrior in seconds." Her voice was shaking. "We are already dead." The creature's multiple eyes focused on them with predatory intensity. Marcus could see muscles bunching under its armored hide as it prepared to strike. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, but he knew it would be useless. Nothing could outrun a Phantom Reaper in its native environment. Instead, Marcus did something that surprised everyone present, including himself. He stepped forward. The Phantom Reaper's head tilted slightly, its movements suddenly less fluid. Marcus took another step, and another, until he was standing directly between the predator and his terrified partner. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't make any threatening gestures. He simply stood there, meeting the creature's alien gaze with calm, steady eyes. "Hello," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the humid air. "We're just passing through." The Phantom Reaper's head tilted the other way. For a long moment, predator and human regarded each other in silence. Then slowly, the creature began to back away. Not in fear. Marcus could sense that this thing knew no fear, but with something that looked almost like respect? Recognition? Within moments, the apex predator had melted back into the jungle as silently as it had appeared, leaving only the whisper of disturbed vegetation in its wake. Zixara was staring at Marcus with all 4 of her compound eyes. "That is impossible," she said, her voice barely audible. "Phantom Reapers do not retreat. They do not show mercy. They do not—" "Come on," Marcus interrupted gently. "We have a lot of ground to cover." As they made their way through the grove of singing stones, Zixara kept glancing at Marcus with an expression he couldn't interpret. The stones themselves were fascinating, crystalline formations that resonated with harmonic frequencies as the wind passed through them, creating an ethereal music that seemed to calm the local wildlife. But Marcus noticed that the stones grew quieter as they approached, as if his presence somehow muted their song. "Marcus," Zixara said finally, as they navigated around a particularly large formation, "what happened back there with the Phantom Reaper? That was not normal behavior. For either of you." "What do you mean?" You stepped toward an apex predator instead of running. No sane being does that. But more importantly, she paused, her mandibles clicking uncertainly. You spoke to it, as if you expected it to understand. Marcus considered this as they walked. He had spoken to the creature, hadn't he? Not because he thought it would understand his words, but because it had felt right, like the natural thing to do when encountering another intelligent being. Maybe it did understand, he said quietly. They encountered 3 more predators over the next few hours. A pack of razor-toothed stalkers emerged from the undergrowth, their blade-like claws gleaming as they surrounded the 2 cadets. Again, Marcus found himself stepping forward, this time humming a low tune his grandfather had taught him, an old Earth song about traveling through dangerous lands. The pack leader's ears perked up at the sound, and after a moment of consideration, it led its pack away. Then there were the crushing serpents, massive constrictors that normally attacked anything that moved through their territory. When one reared up from the swampy ground ahead of them, easily 15 meters of muscle and scales, Marcus simply sat down at the edge of its territory and waited. The serpent studied him for several minutes before sliding away into deeper water. Most disturbing of all was the encounter with the glass spiders. The creatures were beautiful and deadly, their transparent bodies nearly invisible until they moved. Their webs could slice through steel, and their venom could kill most species in seconds. When the pair found themselves walking directly into a web field, Zixara was certain they were doomed. But the spiders didn't attack. They watched from their webs as Marcus carefully lifted the strands aside, creating a path for himself and his partner. One of the larger spiders even extended a leg to help support a particularly heavy web as they passed underneath. "This is madness," Zixara whispered as they emerged from the web field unharmed. "I have studied xenobiology for 6 cycles. I know the behavioral patterns of every predator on this world. None of this should be possible." Marcus was beginning to have his own suspicions about what was happening, but he kept them to himself. Instead, he focused on navigation, using the primitive techniques his grandmother had taught him for reading the subtle signs of the natural world, the way certain plants grew, the patterns of insect activity, the direction of water flow. By evening, they had covered nearly 20 kilometers without a single real threat. Marcus could hear the distant sounds of combat from other directions. The distinctive crack of plasma fire that meant Thakmor was fighting something, the crystalline chiming that indicated Nalseth was using his natural weapons. But around them, the jungle seemed almost peaceful. "We should make camp," Zixara suggested, as the red sun began to set through the canopy. Kitharin nights are the most dangerous time. Even experienced scouts avoid traveling in the dark. They found a small clearing beside a stream that ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Marcus began gathering deadfall for a fire, while Zixara set up their basic shelter. But as darkness fell, something strange happened. Instead of becoming more active, the sounds of the jungle began to fade. The roars and hunting calls that should have filled the night air became distant, muffled. It was as if every predator within kilometers was giving their camp a wide berth. "This is wrong," Zixara said, her compound eyes reflecting the firelight as she scanned the surrounding darkness. "The silence is wrong. Predators should be hunting now. We should be hiding in terror." Marcus poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the star-filled sky. "Maybe they are hunting," he said thoughtfully. "Just not here." "Why not here? What makes this place different?" Marcus looked up at her, seeing his own suspicions reflected in her alien features. "Not the place," he said quietly. "The people." He told her about his research into human evolutionary history during the long journey to Kithara, how humans had evolved not as apex predators, but as persistence hunters. How they had developed the ability to track prey for days across hostile terrain, never stopping, never giving up, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. How they had become so successful at this form of hunting that other predators had learned to avoid areas where humans were active. It is called the persistence predator effect, Marcus explained. When a persistence hunter moves through an ecosystem, other predators change their behavior. They become more cautious. They avoid competition. Zixara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You believe that Kitharan predators are responding to you the same way Earth predators responded to ancient humans? I think it goes deeper than that, Marcus said, staring into the flames. I think there's something in human body language, human scent, human behavior patterns that triggers an instinctive response in predatory species. Something that says, this is a persistence hunter. Avoid direct competition. But humans have been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. How could alien predators have evolved responses to human hunting patterns? Marcus smiled grimly. Maybe persistence hunting is a universal strategy. Maybe every world that develops intelligent life produces at least one species that hunts through endurance rather than raw strength. And maybe, he said, looking directly at her, other predators always learn to recognize and avoid them. The night passed peacefully, with only distant sounds of hunting from far beyond their camp. In the morning, they resumed their journey toward the extraction point, and Marcus began to test his theory more deliberately. When they encountered a territorial marker left by something called a bone crusher, scars in the earth that warned other creatures to stay away, Marcus deliberately crossed into the creature's territory. But he moved with the slow, steady pace of a persistence hunter, not hurried, not aggressive, just inevitable. They never saw the bone crusher, but they found its tracks leading away from the area as if it had decided to hunt elsewhere rather than confront them. When they reached a river crossing guarded by amphibious predators, Marcus sat by the water's edge for an hour, simply waiting and watching. Eventually, the creatures moved upstream, leaving the crossing clear. By the time they reached the extraction point, an abandoned research station overgrown with luminescent vines, Marcus was convinced he had figured out the secret. Humans weren't feared because they were strong or fast or dangerous in the traditional sense. They were avoided because they represented something even more threatening to a predator, competition from a hunter that would never, ever give up. The extraction shuttle arrived on schedule, and Marcus and Zixara were among the first to board. As other teams straggled in over the next few hours, Marcus noticed that most of them bore wounds from their encounters with local wildlife. Thakmor had claw marks across his scaled hide. Nalseth's crystalline body showed stress fractures from impact damage. Even the shadow dancer showed signs of having been in combat. Only the human cadet was completely unharmed. Sergeant Clix looked at Marcus's pristine condition with suspicion. Report, Cadet Chen. Did you encounter any hostile wildlife during the exercise? Multiple contacts, sir, Marcus replied. But no actual combat was necessary. Explain. Marcus chose his words carefully. I believe human hunting strategies create behavioral responses in local predator species that can be leveraged for nonviolent passage through their territories. Thakmor, who was having his wounds treated by the medical team, looked up sharply. You're saying the predators let you pass because they recognized you as a hunter? Not exactly, Marcus said. I think they recognized humans as a type of hunter they don't want to compete with. The Draknari's laugh was sharp and bitter. Compete? You could not compete with a bone crusher if you had a plasma cannon and powered armor. No, Marcus agreed. But I could track one for a week without stopping. I could follow it when it was tired, when it was vulnerable, when it was focused on other prey. I could wait until it made a mistake, and then I could make it pay for that mistake. He met Thakmor's burning gaze. Bone crushers know this, instinctively. So they avoid competition with persistence hunters. The shuttle was quiet for a long moment as the implications sank in. Finally, Zixara spoke up. "If this is true," she said slowly, "then humans are not the weakest species in the Galactic Alliance. You are something far more dangerous. You are the species that other predators instinctively fear." Marcus looked out the viewport as they rose through Cathara's atmosphere, leaving the Deathworld behind. But even as they climbed toward the safety of space, he could see the jungle below teeming with movement. Predators were emerging from hiding, resuming their normal hunting patterns now that the human was gone. "Maybe," Marcus said quietly. "That's why we always wanted to reach the stars. Not because we were brave, but because on some level we knew that anywhere we went, we'd find a place at the top of the food chain." The shuttle climbed toward orbit, carrying its cargo of cadets and a secret that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity. But Marcus was already thinking about the next test, the next challenge, the next impossible world where humans would prove that sometimes the scariest predator was the one that never stopped hunting, even if it took forever to catch you. The emergency klaxon shattered the morning calm like breaking glass. Marcus bolted upright in his bunk, his training kicking in as he reached for his gear. Through his window, he could see the jungle in chaos, trees swaying violently as something massive moved through them, heading directly for the compound. "All cadets to battle stations!" Sergeant Clix's voice boomed over the intercom. "This is not a drill. We have a Code Omega situation." Code Omega. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. In 3 months of training, they had never had a Code Omega alert. It meant something was approaching that could threaten the entire facility, something that the automated defenses might not be able to stop. He rushed to the armory, where the other cadets were already suiting up in their heaviest powered armor. Thakmor was loading his personal plasma cannon with the largest power cells available. The Vorthak cadet Nalseth was charging his bioelectric systems until his crystalline body glowed like a star. Even the normally calm Shadow Dancer was checking its stealth systems and blade arrays. "What are we facing?" Marcus asked as he grabbed his rifle and ammunition. Instructor Vexitai's compound eyes were dilated with fear as she consulted her tactical display. "Long-range sensors detected it 3 hours ago, approaching from the deep jungle. It's unprecedented." "What kind of unprecedented?" Thakmor demanded. "A Kitharan Alpha," Vextai whispered. The armory fell silent. Marcus had read about alphas in the xenobiology texts, but the descriptions had seemed like myths, legends told to frighten cadets. They were supposedly the apex predators of the apex predators, evolutionary throwbacks to an earlier age when Cathara was even more dangerous than it was now. Most xenobiologists believed they were extinct. "How big?" asked Zixara, her mandibles clicking nervously. Vextai checked her sensors again. 500 meters long, possibly more. And it's displaying behavior patterns we've never recorded. It's not hunting, it's searching. "Searching for what?" Marcus asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer. "Unknown," Vextai replied. But her compound eyes settled on Marcus for just a moment too long. They deployed to the outer defensive perimeter, where the camp's heavy weapons were positioned. Marcus took his assigned position at one of the kinetic cannon emplacements, though he doubted anything they had could seriously threaten a creature the size of a space cruiser. The jungle fell silent as the Alpha approached. Not the normal quiet of predators avoiding competition, but the absolute stillness that comes when every living thing holds its breath in terror. Even the wind seemed to die away, leaving the air thick and oppressive. Then Marcus saw it. The Kitharan Alpha emerged from the tree line like a living mountain. Its serpentine body was covered in scales that looked like polished obsidian, each one larger than Marcus's entire body. Its head was magnificent and terrible, with eyes like burning suns and teeth that could crush a hover tank. Ancient scars covered its hide, telling the story of countless battles fought and won over centuries of existence. But what struck Marcus most was its intelligence. This wasn't just a large predator. This was something old and cunning and utterly beyond human understanding. When those burning eyes surveyed the compound, Marcus felt like he was being evaluated by something that had been hunting successfully since before human civilization existed. The Alpha's gaze passed over the defensive positions, dismissing the weapons and barriers as irrelevant. It swept across the various alien cadets, pausing briefly on Thakmor and his massive frame before moving on. And then it found Marcus. The great creature's head swung toward him with sudden, focused intensity. Those burning eyes locked onto his position, and Marcus felt something that went beyond fear into a realm of primal recognition that spoke to the very core of his being. "It's looking at you," Zixara whispered from the position next to him. "Marcus, why is it looking at you?" Marcus stood up slowly, ignoring the shouts of alarm from his instructors. He could feel the Alpha's attention like a physical weight, pressing against his mind with intelligence older than recorded history. And gradually, he began to understand what was happening. This creature wasn't here to hunt. It wasn't here to feed. It was here for the same reason that all the other predators on Kithara had been avoiding him. It was here to issue a challenge. "Stand down, cadet," Sergeant Clix barked over the comm. "Return to your position immediately." But Marcus was already walking toward the barrier, his rifle forgotten. Behind him, he could hear the other cadets arguing in panicked voices, but their words seemed to come from very far away. All his attention was focused on the Alpha, on the ancient intelligence in those burning eyes. The creature's massive head lowered as he approached, bringing its gaze level with his. At this distance, Marcus could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell the scent of ancient jungle and old kills. But he also sensed something else, a recognition that went far deeper than species, deeper than evolution, all the way down to the fundamental nature of what it meant to be a hunter. "You know what I am," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the defensive systems. "Don't you?" The Alpha's head tilted slightly, a movement that somehow conveyed acknowledgement. This creature had lived for centuries, had seen species rise and fall, had watched the jungle change around it, and in all that time, it had never encountered anything quite like humanity. Marcus reached out slowly, his hand trembling slightly as he extended it toward the great creature's snout. The Alpha remained perfectly still, allowing the contact. The moment Marcus's palm touched those obsidian scales, he felt a jolt of understanding pass between them. The Alpha wasn't just recognizing him as a persistence hunter. It was recognizing him as something even rarer and more dangerous, a persistence hunter with technology, with intelligence, with the ability to track prey across the galaxy itself. A hunter that had already spread across hundreds of worlds and would never stop until it had claimed the stars themselves. "You're afraid," Marcus whispered, and the truth of it hit him like a physical blow. "Not of me personally, but of what humanity represents. You're afraid that we're going to hunt everything, everywhere, forever." The Alpha's eyes narrowed, and Marcus felt a rush of images, not words, but pure concept communication. He saw the galaxy as the Alpha understood it, a vast ecosystem where species competed and died and evolved and adapted. He saw the careful balance that predators maintained, the unspoken rules that governed who hunted what and where. And he saw how humanity's arrival had begun to disrupt that balance. Humans didn't just hunt for food. They hunted for knowledge, for resources, for new worlds to explore. They were persistence hunters who had turned their hunting instincts toward the cosmos itself, and they would never stop until they had pursued every mystery to its ultimate conclusion. "You want to know if we can be stopped," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. If there's a line we won't cross, if there's something that can make us give up the hunt. The Alpha's massive head nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed millennia of experience with apex predators and the delicate balance between competition and coexistence. Marcus thought about his ancestors, about the humans who had tracked mammoths across ice ages and sailed into unknown oceans. He thought about the pioneers who had looked up at the stars and decided they belonged there, no matter what it cost or how long it took. "No," he said finally, "there isn't." The Alpha's reaction was immediate and terrifying. Its massive form coiled backward, preparing to strike, and Marcus could see in its burning eyes that it had made a decision. If humanity could not be reasoned with, could not be deterred, then the only option was to eliminate them before they spread any further. But Marcus held up his hand, and something in the gesture made the great creature pause. "But," he continued, his voice growing stronger, "we're not the kind of hunters you think we are. We don't hunt to eliminate competition. We hunt to understand, to explore, to find our place in the ecosystem." He gestured toward the compound behind him, where cadets from 17 different species were learning to work together. "Look at us," he said. "Humans aren't here to conquer this world or drive out its predators. We're here to learn how to coexist with them. We're persistence hunters, yes, but we're also social creatures. We form alliances. We make treaties. We find ways for everyone to thrive." The Alpha's head tilted again, and Marcus could sense its confusion. This was not behavior it had expected from an apex persistence hunter. "You see us as a threat because you're thinking like a solitary predator," Marcus explained. "But humans have never been solitary. We've always hunted in packs, shared our kills, worked together to bring down prey larger than ourselves. We're not here to replace you or eliminate you. We're here to figure out how all of us can hunt the galaxy together." For a long moment, the Alpha considered this. Marcus could feel its ancient mind working through concepts that challenged everything it understood about predator behavior. Finally, it leaned forward again, and Marcus felt another rush of images. This time, he saw the galaxy as it could be. Humans using their persistence hunting skills to track down new worlds for other species to colonize. Draknari warriors and human explorers working together to face threats too large for either species alone. Crystalline Vorthak and Shadow Dancers and all the other species of the Alliance spreading across the stars, each bringing their own gifts to the great hunt for knowledge and understanding. "A pack," Marcus whispered. "You're asking if humanity would be willing to join a galactic pack instead of hunting alone." The Alpha's massive head nodded once more, and Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a conversation between a cadet and an ancient predator. This was a negotiation for the future of human expansion into the galaxy. "Yes," Marcus said without hesitation. "That's exactly what we want." The tension in the Alpha's coiled form slowly relaxed. The burning intensity in its eyes softened into something that might have been relief, or approval, or both. It pulled back from the barrier, its massive form already beginning to turn away. But before it left, it did something that Marcus would never forget. The great creature lowered its head in what could only be described as a bow, a gesture of respect from one apex predator to another. Then it was gone, melting back into the jungle with impossible silence for something so massive. Marcus stood at the barrier for a long time, processing what had just happened. Behind him, he could hear the other cadets and instructors approaching cautiously, their voices filled with amazement and confusion. "What did you do?" Thakmor asked, his usual bravado replaced by something approaching awe. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "I just negotiated humanity's membership in the galaxy's oldest hunting pack." Instructor Vexatai was scanning the jungle with her sensors, confirming that the Alpha had truly departed. In 40 years of xenobiology, she said, her voice shaking, I have never seen anything like that. Kitharan alphas are supposed to be mindless killing machines. They're not mindless, Marcus replied. They're just very careful about who they allow to hunt in their territory. Sergeant Clix was reviewing the tactical recordings, his expression growing more amazed by the moment. You communicated with it, he said. Without words, without translators, you somehow established meaningful contact with a creature that predates galactic civilization. Marcus nodded, still feeling the echo of that ancient intelligence in his mind. Persistence hunters recognize each other, he said simply, and the really successful ones learn when to compete and when to cooperate. Over the following days, word of Marcus's encounter with the Kitharan Alpha spread throughout the Galactic Alliance. Xenobiologists arrived from across the galaxy to study the recordings, trying to understand how a human cadet had achieved peaceful contact with one of the most dangerous creatures in known space. More importantly, reports began filtering in from other worlds. Predatory species that had previously been aggressive toward human explorers were showing new behaviors, cautious respect rather than hostility, territorial negotiations rather than attacks. It was as if word had somehow spread through some vast predator network that humans were not invaders to be driven off, but fellow hunters to be welcomed into the pack. Thakmor approached Marcus on their last day at the training facility, his massive frame casting a shadow across the landing pad where their transport waited. I owe you an apology, human, the Draknari said, his voice unusually subdued. I thought your species was weak because you lacked the strength of true warriors. I did not understand that you possess something far more dangerous than strength. What's that? Marcus asked. Patience, Thakmor replied. The patience to hunt forever if necessary. The patience to track prey across galaxies. The patience to negotiate with ancient predators instead of simply trying to kill them. He extended one massive clawed hand. I would be honored to hunt alongside you, Marcus Chen. Marcus gripped the alien's hand, feeling the incredible strength in those scaled fingers. But more than that, he felt the respect of a warrior who had finally understood what it meant to be human. As their transport lifted off from Kithara, carrying them back to the academy for their graduation ceremony, Marcus looked down at the jungle one last time. Somewhere down there, the Kitharan Alpha was hunting in its ancient territory, secure in the knowledge that humanity posed no threat to its way of life. But more than that, it was probably spreading word to other apex predators throughout the galaxy. The humans were not conquerors or destroyers. They were persistence hunters, yes, but they were also pack builders. And any species wise enough to join their pack would find the galaxy a much more interesting place to hunt. Marcus smiled as the Deathworld fell away below them. Humanity had always been destined for the stars, but now he understood why. Not because they were brave enough to leave their homeworld, but because they were patient enough to spend eternity exploring what they found out there. And in a galaxy full of apex predators, that kind of patience was the most dangerous weapon of all. The transport climbed toward orbit, carrying its cargo of newly graduated cadets and a secret that would reshape galactic civilization. But Marcus was already thinking about his next assignment, his next challenge, his next chance to prove that sometimes the scariest thing about humans wasn't how fast they could kill you. It was how long they were willing to wait to understand you instead.